Alright, so we've covered a couple of special cases of binomials and trinomials. So let's look at the general case. And we're going to first start with this concept here, where we have a quadratic, first one there, and we have a second term, and we have a third term. So this is a trinomial. We have x squared, it could be m squared or b squared. We've tried to mix it up throughout the series, but from now on we're kind of going to stick with x, just to avoid confusion. Because if we were to use another letter, it could become confusing. So in this instance, we have a trinomial, and we have the first term squared. So this is a quadratic expression. We have the first term squared plus b, which in this instance is not a variable, it's just a coefficient, times an x to the first power plus c, some sort of constant, some value. Okay, and we typically try to factor these, just like we saw in the case of the perfect trinomial squares. We try to factor these this way into two binomials multiplied by themselves. So in this instance, we know that the first term has to be x, right? Because we'll end up with the first term here. And we know, because this is a positive and this is a positive, these both have to be positives. And here's the thing about our last term. Our last term has to be the addition of these two terms. Our middle term, Our middle term has to be the addition of these two terms, and our last term is the multiplication. So b, so we're going to call this term 1 and term 2, only to confuse the matter. So b is going to be term 1 plus term 2 times x, and c is going to be equal term 1 times term 2. Okay, not Terminator 2, term 2. So let's look at some examples here. If I were to have, let's say, x squared plus 5x plus 6. What numbers, when I add them together, will give me 5, and when I multiply them together, will give me 6? This is why knowing your times table is important. 2 times 3 gives us 6. 2 plus 3 gives us 5. Okay? So when we're looking at these guys, when we're factoring, and this doesn't work for every term, it won't always come out evenly, and we have something, a little trick up our sleeve that we'll cover later, called the quadratic formula, that will help us to see it. But there's special cases when we can factor. And what you always want to know is there a number, two numbers, that when I multiply them together will give me this, and when I add them together will give me this? Okay? So those are the cases of factoring trinomials. So let's pick another one. Let's say 7x plus 12. 3 times 4 will give us 12. 3 plus 4 gives us 7. So we end up with x plus 3, x plus 4. Oh, and I forgot to write it up here. This one was x plus 2, x plus 3. All right. So now we're going to look at cases where we don't have positive numbers, but the rule still holds.